My name is Grace Shimizu. I serve as the director of the Campaign for Justice, Redress Now for Japanese Latin Americans, and of the Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project. I join you from the traditional territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded or stolen land of the Lushan Ohlone people, also known as Oakland, California, United States. Our Japanese Latin American or JLA Redress Update Report will start off with some background information for those of you who are new to our history and our justice struggle for U.S. government accountability and reparations. If you prefer not to view this JLA 101 refresher, please fast forward to our next steps and get involved sections.
Art Shibayama was just 13 years old and living comfortably in Peru when he was forced out of the only home he had ever known. During World War II, the United States government, in collaboration with several Latin American countries, orchestrated the forced removal and internment of over 2,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, which included both citizens of 13 Latin American countries as well as Japanese immigrants. Like young Art Shibayama, the vast majority were Japanese Peruvians. Shortly after the Japanese military attack on Pearl Harbor, community leaders were scapegoated and rounded up for detention throughout the Americas. In Peru, a blacklist had been generated. While not based on any real or credible evidence of Japanese subversive activity, the blacklist targeted businessmen, community leaders, and educators. In collaboration with Peruvian officials, the U.S. used the blacklist as the basis for rounding up hostages. These hostages were then to be traded for Americans held by Japan. Most of the Japanese Latin Americans were interned in a Department of Justice camp at Crystal City, Texas. But for Art and the other internees, their long ordeal did not end with the close of World War II. The remaining Japanese Latin Americans were told that they were illegal aliens and would be deported. And because the Latin American governments initially refused to allow these internees to return, over 1,000 were thus deported to war-devastated Japan.
The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors, surviving Japanese Americans, of the 120,000 who were relocated or detained. Yet no payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law.
However, Art was denied justice. Under this law, Japanese Latin Americans were deemed ineligible for redress as they were not U.S. citizens or residents at the time of internment. In an effort to call attention to their hidden history and to support efforts for redress, the Campaign for Justice was formed. In response to public pressure, the Department of Justice offered a settlement of only $5,000 each, just 1/4 of the $20,000 redress provided to the Japanese Americans. While supporting the decision of those who accepted the settlement, Art Shibayama, along with several others, chose to opt out of the settlement. He then filed his own lawsuit, preferring to fight for both redress and a full disclosure of the violations committed by the United States during World War II. Despite his efforts, Art was once again denied justice. His case was dismissed in the final months of 2002.
How old were you when you learned of your father's and uncle's wartime experiences? How old were you at that time?
I was approximately 11 years old when I learned the details about how the U.S. government kidnapped, deported, and imprisoned my father and his family.
what did you witness as far as the impact of these experiences on you and your family members?
Myself, I actually, perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt fearful for my own safety. It was actually a personal violation and vulnerability that I had not felt before. And my brother and I were confronted with the harsh reality of racial oppression, and we felt defenseless. But more shocking for me was when I later realized that this feeling or this theme of insecurity ran through my entire family's persona. Suddenly, the words, "with liberty and justice for all," that I recited in grade school every morning rang hollow. I wondered how my government could take my family's basic freedoms and human rights away. My father and his family had done nothing wrong. Their only supposed crime was that they were of Japanese descent, and the US government had a needed excuse to take them as hostages to be used in exchange for Americans being held in Japan. Quite honestly, I cannot say that our family has handled the trauma of these wartime experiences very well. There's still a veil of denial, and it still haunts us and still makes us feel angry and frustrated whenever we think of the injustices that our family had to face.
Can you tell the commission, please, what you witnessed as far as the impact of your grandfather's death following these experiences?
Sure. So tragically, my grandfather died in 1976 at the age of 70. At the time, he was suffering from a severe depression, so it was very sad and upsetting for the entire family. After the Shibayama's deportation from Peru, my grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to regain everything that he had lost in Peru. It wasn't until after my grandfather had already passed that our family really appreciated all that he had gone through as the patriarch of the family. His whole world was actually turned upside down at the hands of the US government. Our hearts break when we think of the tremendous losses and struggles that he was forced to bear, and the shame of not being able to protect his wife and his children from the unspeakable hardships must have weighed heavy on his heart. To this day, my family and I believe that the US government killed my grandfather's spirit. After his capitulation, and from then on, he was never the same man again. Gradually, he became silently entombed in a world of pain and isolation. I only knew him as a shell of his original self, and I just wish that I had shown him more love when I had the chance.
Hi, I'm Natsu Saito. I'm a law professor at Georgia State University in Atlanta. This opinion came down 17 years after the case was originally filed, and it tells us that the claims of the Shibayama brothers are really serious, fundamental violations of human rights. In this decision, the Inter-American Commission emphasizes that the principles of equality before the law, equal protection, and non-discrimination are among the most basic human rights, and that one of the objectives of the American Declaration was to assure in principle the equal protection of the law to nationals and aliens alike in respect to the rights set forth. The Commission also says states have an obligation to provide redress, or what we often call reparations, for wrongs that have occurred, even if they occurred a long time in the past. This is really a groundbreaking decision of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. It affirms the claims of Japanese Latin Americans who have struggled for justice for 75 years and reaffirms the obligations of the United States government to provide both access to information about and meaningful, quote, material and moral redress for long-standing violations of human rights.
This victory is bittersweet since the decision was not made during my father's lifetime. Needless to say, it is extremely aggravating and disappointing that the U.S. government still has not acknowledged nor provided proper reparations for the war crimes committed against our family and over 2,200 Japanese Latin Americans. We would also like to acknowledge the thousands of men, women, and children of German, Italian, Jewish, and Japanese ancestry from Latin America and the U.S., including U.S. citizens who are imprisoned and used in the hostage exchanges. Until there is proper redress and justice, these crimes against humanity are ongoing.
Redress Phase 2 is underway. With the groundbreaking 2019 Shibayama case decision by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in hand, Japanese Latin Americans are continuing to fight for U.S. government accountability. Justice demands reparations that match the scope and severity of the violations of fundamental human rights. In 2022, for the first time included in a presidential proclamation for Day of Remembrance of the World War II Japanese American incarceration, U.S. President Biden acknowledged the JLA incarceration and exclusion from redress under the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. This hopeful sign was later diminished upon learning that the Biden administration considers resolution to be under the purview of the U.S. Congress. While the world is witnessing the escalating turmoil our nation has been confronting, especially in the halls of Congress. The struggle for JLA justice is now in the larger context of the existential threat to our nation's democracy. All communities are once again seeing and experiencing the ascendancy of authoritarian movements in the U.S. and many places around the world. Emboldened racism, wartime hysteria, and failure of political leadership. The JLA struggle for justice and government accountability is an integral part of the larger struggle against racism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism, and for truth, peace, justice, and democracy. Mobilizing for education, reparations, and democracy. The conditions under which we live and work underscore again that we need to know our past so that we can identify lessons to better face the challenges of today. We want to educate ourselves and the public about the World War II treatment of the so-called enemy, persons of German, Japanese, Italian, and Jewish ancestry, both citizens and immigrant residents of the U.S., as well as those seized from Latin America. We want to ensure accountability from our elected officials by securing reparations and a stop to the repetition of the horrors of our nation's history. Our struggle is for historical truth, justice, democracy in action, to right the wrongs of the past and to build a better future for us all. Please join us in urging the Biden administration and Congress to honor the rule of law, including our international legal commitments, and secure proper reparations for the JLAs. JLAs continue to build on the work of decades. Our work has always been collaborative within the Japanese American community, with the German, Italian, and Latinx communities who were also targeted as the enemy during World War II, and with other communities targeted as enemies, whether in the past or today. It is through our collaborative work that we are exposing the historical truth of the U.S. government's World War II domestic and foreign policies and actions, which led to massive constitutional and human rights violations across 2 continents. We are expanding and making more inclusive the wartime and redress narrative. By uncovering the fuller reality, the bigger picture, we are confirming how conditions of war and civil strife can and did lead to claims of military necessity and national security to perpetrate widespread violations of fundamental rights on the basis of national origin, ethnicity, and religion. And we are reaffirming the particularity of this also being a racist attack intersecting with xenophobia and nativism against persons of Japanese ancestry, regardless of citizenship and residency. Through our collaborative work, we are sharing, learning together, and developing understanding, respect, trust, support, and solidarity. And together, we are building the personal and inter-community ties and relations to prevent recurrence of these crimes against humanity and to envision and chart the way forward for a better society and world. We have 3 goals for this stage of our ongoing reparations movement. Teach the Shibayama case in law schools. Support passage of 3 purposeful bills pending in Congress, and educate and mobilize the public for redress action using our powerful resources. During this period, we are reaching out to law school and educators to teach the Shibayama case alongside the Korematsu case in the classrooms. Doing so will remind students that the struggle for redress did not end with the passage of the Civil Liberties Act in 1988, and that Phase 2 of the redress movement continues. It also reminds them that our struggle for justice are being litigated and watched in international tribunals, and that no one should be left behind when one part of an affected group gets redress but not another. The ascendancy of authoritarian movements, especially in the governments of nations, including the United States, has increased the urgency to pass effective legislation that would repeal the Alien Enemy Act of 1798 and similar laws that increase governmental surveillance of minority communities and authorize roundups and detentions without due process constraints. We can highlight 3 bills pending in Congress which protect our fundamental rights, which need to be passed. 1, the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, which repeals the Alien Enemy Act of 1798. It's been reintroduced by Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii and Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. 2nd, the Korematsu Takai Civil Liberties Protection Act, which prohibits unlawful detention based on race, ethnicity, national origin, and other protected characteristics. It's been introduced by Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois and Representative Mark Takano of California. 3rd is the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, H.R. 40 and S. 40. This establishes a commission to study slavery and its ongoing manifestations and impact in the U.S. and recommends appropriate remedies. It has been reintroduced by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey and Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. To advance our education and redress work, We have 3 powerful resources. 1, the groundbreaking Enemy Alien Files Hidden Stories of World War II traveling exhibit. It's been updated and is now on tour. Added as a new feature is the Enemy Alien Files web pages with the exhibit tour calendar, booking information, and online version of the exhibit and other resources. This exhibit is a stunning presentation of the World War II experience of over 31,000 so-called enemy aliens of Japanese, Italian, German, and Jewish ancestry in the United States and from Latin America. The exhibit reminds us of the fragile nature of our constitutional and human rights in times of international and domestic crisis, as well as the human impact of government policy in the name of national security. So please help us to bring the exhibit to your community or campus. We also have the Hidden Internment Art Shibayama Story documentary. It focuses on the experience of former Japanese Peruvian internee Art Shibayama from his forcible deportation from his home in Peru and internment in Crystal City, Texas, to his inspiring activism for JLA justice. Work is underway to now update this film, including the Shibayama case victory at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the current struggle, and the translation into Spanish, Japanese, and Portuguese. And third, we have the JLA oral histories, which are our most treasured resource, serving to help preserve family legacies, to document testimonial evidence, and deepen understanding of wartime and redress experiences, and inspire intergenerational dialogue and activism. We invite you to help us collect, document, preserve, and interpret JLA family histories. We particularly need help to digitize, transcribe, translate, edit, and archive our JLA oral histories. So please get involved. Spread the word about the ongoing JLA reparations struggle. Visit our CFJ website to learn more. Support teaching the Shibayama case in the law schools. Bring the Enemy Alien Files Hidden Stories of World War II exhibit to your community. Volunteer with the Campaign for Justice and Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project. You can help preserve JLA oral histories, help update the documentary Hidden Internment, the Art Shibayama story, share our translation, social media, website, technical, and writing skills, and please contact us to attend our volunteer orientation session. You can also make a financial donation and contact us to be on our mailing list for updates on these important bills in Congress. Neighbors Not Enemy Act, which would repeal the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Korematsu Takai's Civil Liberties Protection Act, which prohibits unlawful detention based on race, ethnicity, national origin, etc. And also the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African American Act, HR 40 and S40. So please stay in touch by following the Campaign for Justice website, Facebook page, and Instagram. You can make a difference. Thank you.